Welcome to this recap. Today, we dive into a raw and revealing conversation between host Nikhil and investor and former Facebook executive Chamath. We will explore the hidden value of pain in entrepreneurship, the mechanics of zero-equity startup grants, forgiving a traumatic childhood, and why external success metrics are an illusion. Right off the bat, the recording catches an off-the-cuff exchange about Nikhil's unique philanthropic project. On screen, Software Factory, founded by Chamath via 8090 Solutions. Before the official interview even begins, Nikhil explains that he funds young Indian entrepreneurs with no strings attached. Unlike accelerators like YC that might take 7% equity, Nikhil provides pure grants of 50 grand to 100 grand to technical founders under the age of 25. On screen, Software Factory, using AI to automate coding and documentation. Chamath is immediately skeptical. He asks how Nikhil selects the candidates and questions whether giving away free capital might actually make things harder for founders who are not ready for it. But Nikhil defends the model, pointing out that India lacks early-stage risk capital entirely. The results also speak for themselves, with several companies reaching valuations of $40 million to $50 million. Interestingly, Nikhil admits he does not do this for personal fulfillment, but rather for long-term access to top-tier talent. On screen, open source and closed source models definitions. This pivots the conversation directly into what makes a successful founder. Nikhil shares a blunt observation about the personality types that actually survive the startup grind. On screen, a line chart showing the U.S. trade deficit in billions from November 2023 to November 2025.
You know, another thing I found with these young kids are the docile, yes, subservient people never turn out to be good. The arrogant pricks are the ones who do better.
Chamath completely agrees, introducing his core thesis that true capability requires a foundation of suffering. He argues that building at a mega-scale requires a willingness to endure relentless punishment, establishing a defining principle of his worldview.
On screen, an annotated map showing U.S. semiconductor supply chain investment locations. As highlighted on screen, Chamath firmly states that pain is a fantastic amplifier of capability. He believes that someone who had a wonderful, sheltered upbringing might be a great human being, but they often lack the grit required to be a great entrepreneur. Pain is a fantastic amplifier of capability, some sort of like grudge, pain, anger. But you know, the child that had a wonderful upbringing is a wonderful human being and not a great entrepreneur. On screen, a line chart showing U.S. total debt from 2018 to 2026. Building on that point, Nikhil asks Chamath to define himself and his own relationship with pain. Chamath describes his fundamental drivers. On screen, a line chart showing the US dollar index value from March 2025 to February 2026. He outlines his identity as simply a guy who loves gaming, taking risks, learning, and growing, as depicted in this diagram. He notes a deep distaste for staying still or accepting the status quo, preferring always to try and change things. Delving into his childhood, Chamath separates his ambition from his trauma. He openly shares that his pain stemmed from a home in crisis, marked by his father's unfulfilled potential, alcoholism, and abuse, alongside his mother's complacency. On screen, a diagram displaying the USA as one block and other nations, regions as another, with flags. Looking at this photograph of Chamath as a young boy, he admits that as a loud and overachieving kid, he often triggered his father's deep-seated insecurities. Yet, reflecting back now as an almost 50-year-old, he expresses profound grace and forgiveness. On screen, USA and other major nations and regions. I think my father was an incredibly smart, capable man who just didn't get a chance to live out his potential. And then he made, the greatest sacrifice possible. Chamath explains that by completely giving up his own life to immigrate to Canada, his father made an ultimate blind bet on his children. This singular act of sacrifice, Chamath says, overrides all the other childhood noise and hardship. On screen, article snippet titled, "A Silicon Valley fund manager holds Bitcoin purchased 7 years ago as it being publicly traded." This realization anchors Chamath's belief that societal benchmarks of success are entirely meaningless. To prove his point, he quizzes Nikhil on who the 87th richest person was in 2020. Or the 14th richest in 2010. This is just to point out that none of it matters. It's all contrived and in your own mind. And in that moment, it feels like it's a matter of life and death. On screen, why gold is a big holding for central banks? Nikhil pushes back slightly, asking if wealth and influence are simply the only things that matter in today's world. Chamath clarifies that society relies on fame, influence, and capital merely as organizing tools to easily communicate human value, which leads into his playbook on external validation. On screen, Tether is a company that creates USDT. In part 1 of Chamath's playbook shown here, he emphasizes the danger of relying on external validation. He insists these external metrics completely miss the point of living, and that true success cannot be quantified or easily broadcasted to others. Continuing to part 2 of the playbook, Chamath differentiates validation from family versus the world. He concludes that real success is a private, internal measure of how much you have evolved from where you started to where you are today. On screen, why stable coins are better. Thanks for tuning into this deep dive on resilience, risk, and the true meaning of success. We will catch you on the next recap.